What's going on, FPL managers? Welcome to another video and podcast from Fantasy Football Scout. My name is Ted, and we're doing a TED Talks video as per usual on the Monday, covering the next game week, which is game week 30. We are currently halfway through game week 29, which is the double. So our ranks aren't yet final, but I'm joined by Andy to run through it all. How are you, buddy?
Good. It's been a minute again, Ted. Feels like we've been doing a lot of TED Talks at PL for a while, and then took a break. So it's good to be back, and did miss you during that time off. So happy to be back.
Oh, I miss you too, bud. But yeah, game week 29 has been pretty hectic. A week where we took plenty of hits. I think many of us took -8s, even -12s this week. Penalty takers came to the rescue for, Harry Kane owners, for Mo Salah triple captainers, for example. And plenty of points on our benches as well, Andy, and I'm sure we'll talk about that coming up. But I don't think anyone's alone in that. I think the Connor Codys and the Jacob Ramseys of this world definitely hit us in terms of those 50-50 starting 11 decisions. But yes, speaking of which, let's before we look at teams, I always do this every week. Before we look at teams, I'm just gonna do the advertising stuff. So Fantasy Football Scout partnered with SoRare Academy. SoRare is this card collecting NFT stuff. So you collect player cards like you do in, I think it's FIFA Ultimate Team, but they're actually worth something. And there are only so many of a certain card out there, so you can actually trade them and stuff. But in order to get into that, where you play against other teams and play in tournaments and stuff with your deck of cards, you can get into it for free by going to SoRare Academy and playing a fantasy game that they run over the top 5 leagues in Europe. You pick 5 players that you want, goalkeeper to forward. And, I've got Thibaut Courtois up to Mo Salah to Kingsley Coman, for example. You can pick anyone you want in a regular week. If they do well compared to other players, you can win some of these SoRare cards. So, aligned with FPL, it should be something fairly intuitive to you guys. If you fancy that sort of thing, get into it. I think the deadline is on the 18th of March this week. So in 4 days' time, so plenty of time to have a look in advance. But yes, let's get into our teams from game week 29. And we'll start with yours, Andy. 48 points, which is a net from 56, 56 with -8, I should say. 4-4-2. I haven't put the Digne red flag on. That was, I've been putting red flags on all of these teams. It's really annoying. Missed the red flag on Digne. But yeah, it's been an okay game week for you, has it, mate?
I don't think it's been okay. I think yesterday I was quite disappointed because I was looking pretty good midweek through game week 28. And then that Thursday, Friday fixture swing really damaged my rank quite a bit, especially because I was heavily leaning on James' captaincy as a non-chip type of player during those couple weeks. So kind of a spiral effect from there. And on paper, I felt like I had such a strong team. The one decision I struggled with was Odegaard versus Martinelli. Decided to go with Odegaard in the end, and kind of have a little bit of regret there. But at the same time, it's too early to tell. How that's gonna go, how that battle's gonna go on. But I had some benching dilemmas: Broya, Livermento, Dennis, but all of them weren't the answer. So I guess it didn't matter. And I'm trying not to focus on those small losses and wins. It's more about the big picture. But yeah, it's a bit worrying because I'm starting to fall back behind a little bit, and I'm wondering when my chip upswing happens later down the line, if that's going to make up for the damage I've caused over the last couple game weeks. So this is a week of sort of, it's not just about FPL. It's about learning as a manager for me. Because on Twitter, I actually posted a couple kind of I'm upset, I'm a crap manager type of, just for sarcasm and for giggles. But part of it also is learning because you have to stay patient. You have to stay focused on your plan. Of course, you adapt along the way, but yeah, we'll see.
I think you haven't done anything wrong, and I think it's just a result of you taking a certain path with your chip strategy. Your time to shine, Andy, is next game week 31 onwards, where you've got your wild
Mm,
card, you've got your bench boost, you've got your free hits, all of this sort of stuff. That's
mm,
going to be your time where you make the ground up. I'm spurning my chips week after week because I'm trying to navigate all of these, game week 28 and 29 double game week. So the fact that I've made some headway is kind of to be expected with those chips. So
right.
you should be climbing back up with green arrows from game week 31. It's no result of your ability to play FPL, for example.
Yeah, I think that there's two things I just want to quickly add. Is I was speaking to my good friend FPL Naive, and he was making a good point about or FPL TT, sorry, about how the difference between me and, let's say, the top 10K is a certain amount of points, and just using one of those chips in itself, such as the bench boost, should make up for that ground. Granted, the worry for me now is that game week 28, for example, or 26 was an ideal time to wildcard because you saw the fixture swings, you saw the, what's ahead, the doubles, and, likewise for you and Pros. Very happy for you guys. But with that uncertainty right now, I'm hoping that it makes sense for me to hold my wildcard to 34. I don't think 31 makes sense at all. 32 is a possibility, but I don't think I would waste it there. Not waste, but use it there in terms of my team. So 34 is probably where I'm going to go to, and I'm hoping that's going to have a big upswing later down the season.
I think that makes perfect sense. You're going to absolutely kill that game week 36 bench boost. That's going to
Mm,
be very big for you. It's
yeah,
just, it's the variance in one game week that can really, either boost you or really screw you over. And that's the luck element that you just need to focus
yeah,
on. And this is what I'm talking about, situational luck. Whichever path you choose, as long as it's logical, is completely fine. But in certain key game weeks, like the Mo Salah triple captain in 26, like the bench boost in 28, which worked out for us bench boosters,
mm,
it's one single game week, and you have to rely on a bit of luck for it all to work out in that one game week.
yeah,
Normally, us FPL managers bring in players for 6 to 8 game weeks, and over that run of a longer period, the better managers will normally do rise up the ranks because they've focused on the long-term view. Whereas these
yeah.
chips, they're always geared towards one game week, and it's so difficult to predict, even with looking at fixtures and form and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, just final thing is that you're exactly right. I'm not worried about the bench boost. I don't really care how well the bench boost does. It's just like the minimum in 36 is I'll get a, let's say 15 to 20 points, right? That's fine. It's more about like, is this wild card later on in the season going to pay off or not? Because you're so limited on time for that, wild card to really take full effect. It's really basing it off of a couple of double game weeks, and that's the risk that I'm taking. It's also a very unique strategy, and part of the strategy that led to me to this point is the fact that I've had such a borderline decent team up till now. Like for example, there's literally no point in me wildcarding out of a team like this when I'm already stacked up on Liverpool, Arsenal, and Spurs, right? So with that being said, all the high EO threats around me have been hurting me tremendously, like Coutinho and Rafinha, for example. So, or at least that one assist from Rafinha. So, yeah, it's been a interesting ride to say the least.
Yeah, I don't think your team is like too far away from the people that wildcarded back in 26 because you've used your free transfers to adjust to it. I think, people like myself who've got tons of Wolves players and Aston Villa players left over, we
Mm,
have to get rid of them all in the coming few weeks. Whereas
mm,
maybe you can be a little bit more flexible about bringing
yeah,
in like the Leicester players and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, we'll get to that. But yeah,
yeah,
let's move on to my team. I'm on a 71 -8, which is 63. So fairly decent. Quite a lot of that is coming from Salah triple captain, which I was incredibly fortunate. Goodness me, I couldn't believe the turn of events. I'm not sure whether he'll play on Wednesday, but it's a real shame if he doesn't, because it's just, it's out of everyone's control. But that 5 minutes of getting a penalty, getting a fairly fortunate penalty,
mhm,
and then being subbed off was like just after the 60-minute mark as well. So he got the second appearance and the clean sheet point as well. So yeah, I'm not really sure what to think about it. Compared to game week 26, when Salah got 81 points, not holding out much hope for anything close to that, even if he does play. But if he doesn't, I'd be pretty disappointed. But it is what it is. At least he got something. 27 isn't the end of the world. Yeah, I took a -8 to bring in basically triple Spurs, but that involved transferring Son out. So that was the big dilemma this week. And I'm not sure, seasoned FPL managers will go, that's a terrible move. But I wanted Kane, I wanted Kulusevski, I wanted Broja out. So those guys out. And fairly fortunate again. Kane got the penalty, Kulusevski won it. He couldn't write it really. But even with those returns, it doesn't really cancel out the -8. So we'll have to see what happens against the Brighton game. But Digne, playing Digne ahead of Cody, 14 points on the bench, really hurt. Really hurt.
By the way, Ted, so I'm probably notorious in the community now for being probably the worst at pronouncing names, but that was bad. It's Dean, not Digne, or however you pronounced it.
We can definitely argue about that. Is it?
Am I wrong about this? Oh crap! I thought it was Dean for sure.
Let us know in the chat whether you think it's Digne or Dean. Okay. I think it's Dean. I know he's French, for goodness sake.
I'm pretty sure it's Dean. I'll put $10 on this. I'm pretty sure it's Dean.
Okay. Well, I'll bow to anyone's better judgment. But yeah, let us know in the chat if who's right about Dean or Digne's pronunciation. Anyway, yeah. I was definitely playing Saiss before putting Digne in the starting lineup. But yeah, Wolves keeping clean sheet, so annoying. I was kind of the reason because that someone on Twitter was saying that there was going to be some rotation in that Wolves backline because Willy Bolly was back and he played a good game. So Kilman might have dropped out, Saiss might have dropped out, and I was like, oh, who do I play? Cody with very little goal threat, can't put him in the starting 11. And of course he goes on and scores, doesn't he?
Classic.
So, very, very annoying. But yeah, can't complain. Decent game week. Lacazette scores again. He's just like the jammiest pick ever. He just gets weak assists and penalties. Like he's such a good FPL player. Anyway, yeah, 63. I'm all right with that. But yeah, let's have a look at game week 30, shall we? Because we've got quite a lot to think about and only 8 fixtures, so I'll get them up. Only 4 fixtures, only 8 teams playing. So I've got the fixtures up here, coupled with the postponed fixtures that are yet to be rescheduled for these teams. So the fixture difficulty, Wolves at the top, Aston Villa at the bottom, that's ordered just by the game week 30 difficulty. Wolves arguably with the best fixture against Leeds and Leicester against Brentford. The 2 most difficult fixtures, West Ham against Spurs, tough one for them, and then Aston Villa against Arsenal. Both Spurs and Arsenal are doing all right, although it has to be said, Andy, Spurs have been pretty volatile in their results over the last 8 to 10 game weeks, haven't they?
Yep. I mean, you think about it, right? Look, on Burning Questions last week, I got very excited about them with caution. I want to say that. And by the way, all episode last week, Ted, I was pronouncing Kulusevski as Kulufsky. And trust me, for a week, I was like, oh my goodness, like you got to get the basic stuff right, Andy. So apologies, guys. I'll do better with pronunciations. But yeah, anyway, so if you think about the win last week against Everton, when we were so hyped up on them, and you look previous to their last, I guess, 6 or 7 games, they only won 3 games, right? They beat Everton, they beat Leeds, and they beat Man City. Man City one, let's take exception, but it's also very similar to the Leeds and Everton wins because the Leeds and Everton wins are both against very high pressing teams, right? And both of them sort of early goals happened, and once the early goals happened, it unlocked the floodgates. So I think in hindsight, it's easy to say, if I went back, I would have kind of set this narrative a little bit more about we should be very cautious of how they're winning games right now. And you saw against this United team, honestly, United won. Cristiano was amazing, right? Amazing hat trick. And as a fan of Cristiano, that was amazing to watch. But there was no like fighting spirit in Spurs this game, I felt like. And it was very discouraging of a performance after such a great game against Everton. Granted, it is Everton. So yeah, it's like it's so inconsistent. Literally, it's impossible to predict how they're going to do in the next game. For example, they might come out banging. They might come out lackluster. Who knows, right? So
I
yeah.
think you're spot on about the opposition, though. I think Spurs have always been a low possession, high counter-attacking team, and that just if someone wants to play against them, it kind of plays into their hands. But Man United weren't that great, and they scored 3 goals. It's just Ronaldo was awesome. That was basically the highlight. So I think Spurs, I don't know whether they were unlucky or lucky or whatever. I didn't watch the game live, but I think if they play against a team that has, high possession, then their counter-attack can be fairly fruitful. And West Ham probably are kind of that team that play a little bit with higher possession, so it could suit them. And West Ham aren't exactly prolific at the moment at scoring goals or even, preventing goals from being conceded. So I think it's an okay fixture for them, Spurs. And
yeah,
I think I think Spurs are gelling at the moment. Like they've finally got a decent starting 11 that they're going to rely on. Doherty, you tweeted that you said you were really impressed with him. So tell us about Doherty's performance, even though he didn't get any FPL points.
He played good. I don't understand the you have to watch. A team can lose, but a player can be decent. Look, in the second half, I don't think he was as good as the first half. But what I saw in the first half is a guy with confidence, because when you try to assess a player and their form, you look at the little things, right? So when I compare a guy like Reguilon to Doherty, the difference is that his first touch is way better than Reguilon, right? And not golf. Football is such a fast-paced sport where at this high elite level, that little half space, half tempo touch is very important. And his first touch, long balls coming to him, blah blah blah. He was good. He was good, and he was making stuff happen. He was trying to make his stuff happen. Granted, his crossing was not great. Second half, I don't think Doherty played very well, but I think I'm very happy with his performance. As long as they're able to, maybe keep a clean sheet, he's going to have some attacking threat in the next game. Let's hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the distance between him and Emerson Royale is growing a little bit. So hopefully his minutes are a little bit more secure going forwards, which is great for Doherty owners. But obviously Reguilon got his goal the weekend, which is, did he get a goal? No, of course he didn't get a goal. That was previous game, wasn't it?
He got a fluky assist. Yeah.
A fluky assist. Oh yeah, with the Maguire own goal. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll have to excuse me.
Doherty is no amazing. He's not Danny Alves, guys. Tech XCO. I agree with you, but I don't think he played. I think he had a decent game, is what I'll say.
Yeah. I mean, for 4.7 million, and we're kind of assured that he's going to play a little bit more. And Spurs got a fixture in 30, which is more than most teams. So, we might be getting a little bit carried away. But for the double game week with Brighton to go in 29, not too unhappy. Yeah. But yes, I mean, back to the fixtures, and yes, we talked about the number of postponed fixtures that Leicester still have to be rescheduled. This might be the time that we can start getting on the Leicester bandwagon. Harvey Barnes seems to be a popular pick at 6.5, Maddison at 6.7. Vardy might be back at some point, not 100% sure now is the time to get him. But certainly a couple of Leicester players with the possibility of plenty of double game weeks on the horizon might not be a bad idea. So yeah, it's an interesting one. It's a small game week. Not sure there's plenty of upside, but let's have a look at the matchups themselves. These are the attacking prowess of the teams versus the defensive prowess of their opponents. And we've got XG of the team towards the right-hand side. We've got Arsenal with the highest XG. And then their opponents' XG conceded towards the top. So Leeds are the worst defensively. Wolves versus Leeds. And there's not really a standout team in the top right-hand side where the team's attacking prowess is completely head and shoulders above the XG conceded of their opponent. So it's a sort of straight diagonal line in the middle, with Arsenal playing a fairly strong Aston Villa defence. Conversely, Wolves, who are fairly poor attacking-wise, playing a very weak Leeds defence. So not too many obvious options here. Spurs, Leeds, Brentford, West Ham, all very decent. The ones that kind of confuse me a little bit are Leicester's XG isn't as good as we think it is, and Brentford's XG conceded is actually fairly middling. So do we expect that many goals in there? And the other one is Aston Villa's XG isn't actually that good, and compared to Arsenal's incredible XG conceded. So very difficult, like for Aston Villa owners like Coutinho, such as myself, or Jacob Ramsey for you. Like, can we expect too many goals from Aston Villa against Arsenal, Andy?
No, probably not. This is a great chart, by the way. I really like. I don't think I've seen a chart like this from you previously, so very interesting. But yeah, I don't think there's going to be many. Maybe. I mean, Arsenal is one of those teams that look, they're playing great, right? They're in form. Every time I think they have a very good chance to win any game against even the best teams in the league right now, just because of the way they're playing. But Arsenal's always susceptible to a goal in minute, random out of nowhere. So there's that. But they did a decent job of keeping a clean sheet this game, and yeah, we'll see. I think this matchup is very unpredictable.
It's interesting because I think there's some left field options here. Like Ivan Toney has scored 5 goals in his last 2 games. I know plenty from the penalty spot, but he's playing a Leicester team that's fairly weak defensively. Have you even considered Ivan Toney, or is it just a bit knee jerky?
Yeah, he's a tough one. I'm sure you've had him for a good chunk of this early part of the season, right?
Yeah.
Like most of us did. So we know what he's like. He does this when nobody owns him, and then we, own him, and he doesn't do anything. So it's like one of those guys that, he's 6 point something for a reason, and he plays for Brentford. So you can't just expect a return every single game. But I think he's a good shout. He's got the confidence right now. He's got the goals going. He's got the hat trick previously. So yeah, decent shout.
I think there's plenty of people on social media saying he could be a good replacement for Breuer, who has been pretty bereft of any attacking returns recently. But yes, he's only 5.4 million. But still, you kind of want to return here or there. And especially in double game weeks, he's sort of gone missing. So Ivan Toney could be a decent shout. I think Brentford had a couple of rearranged fixtures, didn't they? Maybe I got that wrong. But yeah, he could be a good pick against a weak Leicester defence. Leeds against Wolves. Wolves actually XG conceded isn't actually that great, but I think they do have a tendency to keep out the goals. I mean, Jose Sarr is probably a big element in that, in preventing some of this XG. But Leeds are going to have plenty of opportunities to score. And Rafinha has been, let's say, pretty unlucky not to get double-figure hauls in plenty of these games, especially against Norwich. Did you watch that game? It was pretty frustrating.
Yeah, I try not to watch that game because I don't own it. I don't own him. And I think his actually was 2 point something ridiculous, right? So yeah, I got away with that for sure. With an assist. So
he's making a habit of hitting like the crossbar on every single free kick that they get as well. So close. But
I'll tell you a funny story, Ted. My boy FPL Bruno, shout out FPL Bruno. Early in the season, while I was so hyped up on Rafinha, he said one thing that still sticks to me to this day is that Rafinha never hauls. And he's never gotten a double-digit return, right? And that statement is still true to this day. He never hauls. It's really, really weird. So
it's a really interesting one. We've got some stats coming up to have a look at these players as well. But I think part and parcel, if you have an outstanding player in the team, he's going to get a goal maybe here and there. But to also get a double figure haul, you're going to have these innocuous assists that you're going to have to rely on your teammates to convert. And sometimes his teammates are just incredibly unreliable at converting any chance he creates for them. Yes, obviously Gelhardt popped it in the back of the net the weekend, but that was literally 3 yards out. So the small chances that he creates, like Lacazette does for Arsenal, and he's got world-class players like Saka and Odegaard around him that can score 15-yard screamers. Rafinha doesn't have that around him necessarily. Maybe Bamford when he's in form, like we saw last year. but certainly since Bamford's been injured, he hasn't had that lucky goal that he sort of assisted from 30 yards out or whatever. So kind of frustrating for Rafinha, but there's no denying he's an absolute quality player. And I think if you're happy owning against Wolves, I think he could score a decent free kick or a long range effort as we've seen him do in the start of the season. So yeah, he's probably the only option from that Leeds side, right, Andy?
Let me ask you a fun question. Besides FPL, you think Rafinha could walk into any team in the league and have a pretty good chance of starting, like for example Liverpool and City?
Yeah, like compare Luis Diaz to Rafinha. How different a player is he? Obviously, other than playing on the opposite wing, I think they're both fairly adept at dribbling the ball, taking past players, very technically able. I think Rafinha would fit in to Liverpool side just as Luis Diaz was. It might have to be if Salah ends up going at the end of the summer. I don't know what the contractual talks are, but yeah, I think he's world class. He could fit into any sort of side. I think Leeds would do a decent job holding on to him, to be honest. But but anyway, I mean, back to the matchups and like who we are going to consider for game week 30. And I want to talk about Wolves here because they're an enigma to me this season. Jimenez has sort of been on and off here and there. I mean, they don't score that many goals, but they're a very solid team. And do we have to count more on their clean sheet potential than the number of goals that they're scoring? What do you think about Jimenez as an option versus Leeds? Because for me, I'm sort of licking my chops.
Jimenez is always a decent option as long as he's starting, right? Because he's essentially the talisman for the team. Any talisman for a mid-table team in FPL provides value. Whether you kind of suck up the value well or not is partially down to luck and timing. But a mid-table team that has a star player in around the mid-price range in FPL is always a decent shout, right? Granted, Wolves are not that attacking. It's very inconsistent, their goals. And so how much do you rely on it? I'm not so sure, but it is Leeds. So if they do score, he has a very high chance of being involved.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Anyone that hold on to him, he might get a goal here and there. Fingers crossed. Quite a popular move in the community that I've been seeing is the consideration of moving Salah down to a Leicester midfielder such as Barnes or Maddison, and then the likes of Rafinha or Coutinho up to Salah again in game week 31. What do you think about the legitimacy of that move, and do you think it's worth it for 2 free transfers?
As someone who still holds their wild card, that's something that, look, I don't wish injury on anyone. But from an FPL gaming perspective, I have how do I word this the right way? If Salah's out for a while, it actually benefits me in some ways because I can always wildcard him back in. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens with Salah. I think he misses this game on Thursday. Sorry, triple captainers. Of course, he could start. Who knows? Blanks in 30, and then we probably will not have an idea. Maybe we do, maybe we don't, but most likely we don't know if he's going to be back for 31 against, I guess, Watford, right?
Yeah.
Watford. So it's a really tricky one because are you going to risk getting off of him in 30 just to hokey cokey and bring him back in, or maybe there's hope that he's not available for 31 and you can kind of mess around with that budget and then wildcard him back in. But as a non-wildcarder, I'd be trying to just maybe hold on to him.
Yeah, agreed. I think first of all, we have to see what Klopp says in the press conference and whether he plays in Wednesday, of course. But then if he doesn't, then afterwards, Klopp will probably iron out the details. But I think Watford is such a good game for Salah, especially if he misses a couple of games. He's rested, recovering from injury. We've seen a couple of seasons ago that prolific game where he scored 4 goals and an assist. I think it was 29 points or something. That was against Watford, and we know what he can do. I mean, there is a chance that Klopp plays the B team that game because they've got a very hectic schedule, Liverpool. So maybe that damage will be limited. But still, I'd be very, very wary about going without Salah for 31. Obviously, the strategy is to bring him back for 31. 2 free transfers, the loss of team value, not quite sure it's worth it, even for an extra player in a game week, because Leicester play Man United in 31. I don't know whether you consider that to be a good fixture for Leicester, but it's certainly a little bit more unpredictable than playing a bottom side, I'd say.
Yeah. No, I agree. And what's the date today? March 14th. Looks like the Watford game is April 2nd. So that's a lot of time. I mean, I'm pretty sure he comes back in time. So yeah.
Yeah, what's the schedule for them? I think they've got obviously Brighton, and then they've got FA Cup, and they've got a European game, I think, at some point as well. So quite a lot of games to pack into the next couple of weeks.
They just play Brighton, by the way. So they have Arsenal.
Sorry, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, Arsenal. I think Arsenal quarterfinals, FA Cup, and then Watford. So.
Oh, they don't have a European game in between.
After Watford.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, that would probably make sense, actually, because he could just rest players against Watford and then play them in a big Champions League game the following Wednesday, I think it might be. So yeah, that probably makes more sense. Yeah. But yes, I think it's a really interesting move. I would be very tempted, of course, but I think 2 free transfers ahead of game week 30, if you just roll the transfer this week, might be a little bit more beneficial. But I think the bottom line is, just looking at this chart, for example, there aren't like clear teams to go and target that are definitely going to reap rewards. So I think just playing it cool, even rolling transfers, just maybe not taking hits this week, that's probably my recommendation. Would you sort of agree with that, Andy?
Yes and no. I think this is a week to be defensive. And you have to define defensive for your own team structure, right? Whether that means you free hit, maybe, or that means you take a -4, -8, and essentially it is a -4. However, you're defending against the high EO players, which is one of the reasons why I decided to bring in Son and Kane last week. I could have done the Son to Kulu and kept Laka and upgraded someone like Dennis to Kane and kind of had more spread out of a team and more budget to work with. But right now, I only have 7 with the Dean injury for game week 30, and yet I'm still leaning towards not free hitting because of the fact that I'm covered in Kane and Son and Arsenal 3. So the big heavy players for game week 30 is covered. That's sort of the defensive kind of strategy that I have. Granted, I have no room and money to get to, for example, a Rafinha or Coutinho, who's going to be very high damage to me if they do really well. So I have 4 or 5 days to really think about what to do. Free hit is still on the table; it's an option, but man, I would just feel like I panicked if I free hit it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that the upside is there this week. I think quite a lot of players that you'd look to bring in, like Rafinha, like Coutinho, whoever, we will probably be looking to get rid of them going forwards. So it would be a very short-term move with limited upside. So that's what I was alluding to earlier. It's it's probably not that there's not that much upside to actually take transfers and hits for these players. Just go with what you've got. But yeah, quite a lot of the chat have corrected us about Liverpool's schedule. Thank you very much for that. The international break between 30 and 31, Paudy was saying. So that makes sense. Yeah, I think Egypt versus Senegal, Frances was saying. So yeah, maybe Salah misses the international break. Maybe he plays both games. Who knows? Andy Mack saying resting players, don't be ridiculous. Yeah, Liverpool obviously 3 points behind City. I think they might be level with 1 game ahead. But yeah, regardless, they're incredibly close to City, vying for the title challenge, and resting players in any Premier League game is a risk for Klopp because he just wants to, play his best team and hopefully get 3 points and slog these players week after week. So flog them, I should say. So yeah, it's a really difficult one. I think we have to think a long-term view about who we want in the future, especially game week 33. The navigation of that is going to be particularly difficult. So look ahead rather than maybe look at game week 30 right now.
By the way, Ted, just as a reference point for the listeners is that What's one of the more popular questions in a blank game week is that how many players do we need? What's the minimum? And
Yeah.
even something I ask myself too, right? And shout out to Adam and Baker of Above Average FPL. They did a segment today, and I was listening, and Baker was pointing out that in the top 10K right now, most managers have I think 7 or 8 FPL players for Game Week 30. And so you reckon with the free hits, with the transfers, and this and that, it'll add up to probably around 9 or 10, possibly 11, but I think around 9 or 10. So that's the sweet spot, right? So even if you have 8, but 8 of them cover the main essential players, you're fine. You're in a good defensive, kind of strategy play here, and yeah. So
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Definitely a week to be defensive. If you can cover the effective ownerships, the higher effective ownership players, then I think that's all that's necessary, really. If you haven't got 11 players already, such as. But I think you're right. It doesn't really matter how many players you've got because some of those players could be absolute trash and are likely
exactly.
to concede. You could have 5 defenders that are just going to, that they're going to concede against the Arsenals, the Tottenhams, the Leicesters of this world. So it just really depends. If you've got the key players, don't panic. It's not a week that's going to be a high upside. It's not going to be a 100-point week. It's going to be a 40-point week. And I think, you're not going to lose too much ground. Saving free hits, saving wildcards, saving any chip is worth it. I don't think this is the game week to play it. So yes, let's go and have a look at some of these players that are actually playing this week and seeing, how prioritizing, having warned against not bringing any of these players in. Let's see how essential these guys are. So I've got the chance diagram here, which is just the 4 main types of efforts that can actually lead to FPL points. This is kind of like a visualization of what my normal chart consists of. So in the sort of lilac on the left-hand side, we've got the small chances created, which is basically all of the efforts that Lacazette's been setting up recently, like the little touches off and outside the box, and then someone scored from like 18 yards. So we've got Rafinha top of that, 15 small chances created. And this is what I was saying to you earlier, Andy. He's creating a lot. He's creating a lot of chances, Rafinha, but they're not really getting converted. So actually after this chart, I'll give you the exactly same chart with how much they've actually scored and assisted. And it's actually... the parallels are ridiculous, so I think I can spoil it for you. Rafinha has not got a single small assist in the last 6 game weeks, despite creating 15 small chances. So his teammates are letting him down to a certain extent. But after that, you've got Podence and Odegaard, 2 players I kind of hadn't really considered, although like Odegaard's like a decent player. But that's quite a lot. It's quite a lot. Would you consider Podence? I know you already have Odegaard, but it's a very short-term move, and Wolves against Leeds is the only upside, I'd say.
I mean, I probably wouldn't go there, but I think Podence is a fantastic player, and he's actually one of the kind of routes to attack when Wolves struggle to create anything. So nifty little player, and I really like Podence. So he's fun, but I don't think I'd go there just because essentially he's a player that plays for a not that high attacking mid-table team. So yeah,
it's actually interesting because I've actually married this against defensive stats for small chances conceded, and Leeds are actually not too bad at conceding small chances. So Podence against Leeds, he's not going to be getting that many. It's because Leeds play with like such gusto. They have the ball quite often. They tend to concede more big chances than small chances. And if Podence isn't going to get in the right position like Jimenez is, then he's probably not the right option for this match. Right. But yeah, Odegaard, Saka, that doesn't really surprise me. Like all of these good players are always going to be involved in the game. They're always going to be setting up tenuous chances for their teammates. Saka assisted Odegaard a couple of game weeks ago. Odegaard, that was
game week.
Yeah, that was a small chance goal for Odegaard. So there's plenty of options here. Does anyone else on the small chance created list sort of spark any interest? Because there's quite a lot of replications across the other categories.
I think it's fairly straightforward. I knew Lacazette was was going to be a big decision for me, because I had him and I moved off of him. Granted, for the likes of Kane and keeping Son, so it was a tough decision to make. But I'm very worried as a non-Lacazette owner. But the theory behind getting Odegaard for me was, um, I was afraid of Martinelli getting subbed, and I can't be dealing with any not subbed, but benched appearances. But I don't think that's going to stand. I feel like Arteta is trying to really push and get the top four spot, and he's going to field his best team consistently. It seems like he's that type of manager at this point in time. So as a Martinelli owner, I'd be very confident he continues to start. But the idea was that Arsenal create 40% of their chances from, this is from Tom Friedman's article, from the central zone, over the season, whereas it's like 27-28% from the left and right zone. So that just made me feel like, okay, Lacazette's creating all these small chances from the middle and he's going to get the goals, but he's 8 point something million. At 5.5 million, I can get another route to attack in the Arsenal team where it's most common, which is through the middle. Yes, Odegaard sits back. Yes, he does the pass to assist a lot, but his connection with Saka is what really stood out to me. And he's been an essential part of Arsenal's attack. Like a lot of stuff runs through him, right? So that was kind of the theory behind Odegaard. And quickly on the small chances, I know I'm dragging on here, is without getting too tactical, Kulusevski's arrival has altered Son's role. And so his XA has been going up while his goal threat has been going down a little bit. So I'm not surprised to see Son's small chances up there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of that's spot on. The interesting thing is, like Rafinha with his small chances created, Lacazette hasn't scored a single small chance. So he's clearly shooting a lot, but he clearly doesn't have that ability to convert it into the top corner, like maybe Saka, like Martinelli, whoever does. So the only player on that list that scored 3 small goals is Coutinho. He's had 18 small chances. He's converted 3 of them. So that's ability, and technical ability goes a long way, doesn't it? I mean, Saka's got 2. I have to say, Saka's got 2 small goals. Coutinho's got 3. Ruben Neves is the only other player to score 2 small goals. Everyone else is on 1 or 0. So it just goes to show these small chances don't go in very often, and Coutinho and Saka are definitely the ones that have the technical ability to do it. So maybe that Lacazette with 19 small chances is a little bit misleading, but it's certainly showing intent to a certain extent.
On Coutinho, real quickly, is when did he banged in Game Week 28, right? And previous to Game Week 28, for a couple of game weeks, he was quiet. Wasn't doing much. Granted, I don't watch every single game, so I don't actually know if the eye test was appealing, but he wasn't returning, and I guess like he was playing a little bit different of a role than when he first came in January. So a big shout out to the managers that brought him in Gaming 28. I think that was those are like the season defining transfers here and there throughout the season. And if you brought him in Gaming 28, that's kudos to you. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's timing apart from anything, isn't it, with FPL? But I just really like the way that his teammates describe him play. They always say like he's got the next level of intelligence when they play. They just run and expect the ball to come to them, which is absolutely fantastic. And that's got to deliver a hell of a lot of confidence to the players around him. So yeah, I really am second guessing myself about whether I need to get rid of him against their tough run of fixtures. I think I probably will.
Interesting.
But it does make me think once again, like, why get rid of a player with such talent? Especially Aston Villa aren't going to get run over by every single team in the league, even if they're playing the top 6. So Coutinho could get in with those goals, especially if he's scoring the small chances, the tenuous efforts that don't rely on Aston Villa completely pummeling another team. So it does make me second guess myself.
Yeah, I think a lot of veteran managers will say rule number 1: don't trade out a player who's returning FPL points and in form. So I'd be very scared. I'd be very cautious to just remove him just because of fixtures turn. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a good segue into talking about the big chances. The big chances and big chances created. Coutinho is highest with 4 big chances created. And spoiler alert, before we get to the next chart, he's also got 3 big assists to go with his 3 small goals. So that's like 6 returns in his last 6 game weeks. Is very, very in form. And I'm not, it's really convincing myself to keep him, actually. It's absolutely fantastic. I mean, Kulusevski's there with 4 big chances created. I'm not 100% sure whether that includes the handball penalty for Kane, because sometimes that goes under like an FPL assist rather than an actual assist. But there's plenty of big names on that big chances created. Kane, Son, Rafinha there. But more often than not, the big chances in green go down to the clearest efforts, the one-on-ones, the penalties, the clear sight of goal. And Tony's up there with 5 big chances behind Kane and Son with 8 and 5 respectively. So Tony, I think, is getting the big chances. I think some of those are the penalties. So definitely worth eyeing up. But the one that I'm kind of looking at is 3 big chances for Jimenez. And when we compare that to Leeds' defensive data, Leeds are second worst for big chances conceded in total with 20 in the last 6 matches. But they're also worst for big goals conceded, and that's 13. 13 big goals conceded. 19 goals conceded in total. 13 of them are big chances. Just to put that into perspective for you, Norwich are next worst with 11, and then after that, it's only Burnley with 7. So Leeds are doubling the 3rd worst goals conceded team in Burnley with 13. And Jimenez, with maybe that indication that he's probably the one that gets the more big chances for Wolves, he could have a double figure haul, hopefully, against Leeds. But you never know. Marrying these sorts of chances off with the goals types of goals conceded that a team really does have a propensity for conceding is kind of a good idea. So after seeing that sort of stuff, we could go on and have a look at the type of... Let's do it. I'm going to go straight on. It's exactly the same chart, but it's the number of assists, the type of assists, and the type of goals they've scored. We've got Lacazette up there, 4 small assists, 2 more than any other player in this game week. And that's to sort of emphasise that he's getting lots of like tenuous assists, relying on his teammates to score. Coutinho top with 3 small goals. Kane top with 5 big goals, along with Tony with 5 as well. And then for the big assists, we've got 3 for Coutinho and Kulusevski. Kind of the obvious picks, don't you think? Maybe Tony is probably the one that isn't. But I mean, after seeing all of this stuff, does it convince you to get any short-term pick for game week 30? There's certainly some players in form.
Yeah, I mean, just the main guys, right? There's nothing that stands out in terms of a peculiar pick or one that's not common already. So again, it just goes back to our initial discussion about who can you get to defend this game week, basically, because of the fact that, as you mentioned, a free hit upside is very limited. We both agree there, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, if you don't have a Kulusevski, you go for Kulusevski. If you can somehow get to Coutinho, you go to Coutinho. I mean, you could go to Rafinha too. I don't think that's a bad move. Like, his XG is still there, right? So, yeah, I don't think there's one. Go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, I think Leeds fixtures are okay after game week 30, so he's definitely not like an immediate transfer out. I think they're playing Southampton at some point. I think it might be 31 or 32, who are, in poor form at the moment, and he could get something there. But Wolves aren't exactly, reducing the amount of XG conceded they have, so they're going to get their chances. Rafinha's certainly there. It's just interesting, like, to hear other people's perspectives about whether they need to tear their hair out about getting these players in, because the limited upside is there, but also there are plenty of players here that are really, really in form, such as Coutinho, Kulusevski, Kane, Tony, Saka, Lacazette, they're all
Yeah.
absolutely, they're rivaling some of the best players in the
Yeah.
league.
Yeah. Okay. So I think you help me clarify what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking is that in FPL, you can't own everybody,
Yeah.
right? You want to own everybody to defend. And these are the times throughout the season. Sometimes it's very simple, right? Sometimes there's a smaller pool of popular players that are playing well and you just know who to go for. But right now we know who to go for. It's just the pool of players that have that have high EO is a little bit larger than we can obtain in our own personal teams. So this is something that isn't your fault if it doesn't go your way, right? It's like if your players bang and the other high EO threats don't do well, great. But the opposite could easily happen as well, or it could be kind of a level playing field. So again, there's so many good options you can go for right now to defend, and it's just who can you actually bring into your team structure and how many do you want, basically.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because
Mm.
even with a comparatively small pool of players like we have now,
Yeah.
it just goes to show what we were saying earlier. As long as you can cover the main options off, the Kanes, the Sons, the Kulusevskis, the Coutinhos, the Rafinhas, the Lacazettes, those sorts of players. I mean, who knew that I was going to be talking about Lacazette as a key option in FPL? Yeah. He's just ticking along.
Exactly.
As long as you can cover those players, you'll be fine. I think it's interesting that we haven't got any Leicester players on here, by the way, like Barnes and Maddison on. Oh no, Barnes is there. Barnes is there. One small goal. I mean, that's okay. That's okay. But it just goes to show, like, he's not as in form as people are sort of alluding to. It might be a preemptive transfer with all of the double game weeks coming up. But maybe it's worth just taking a little bit more time and sussing out how these players are going to play closer to game week 33, which is probably when you want them for.
Yeah.
So,
but key thing, Ted, is that the difference between a Lacazette and a Kane and a high EO in Kulusevski versus Kane and Coutinho as well is the fact that Kane's going to be the most highly captain player this game week, right? So, if I was to suggest to somebody who doesn't have Kane, what move should I make this week? It'd be to somehow get Kane, because if he does really well and you don't own him, it's going to be pretty damaging, I think.
I think that's why a lot of us took -8s to get him in this week, because he's quite difficult to get if you don't have money in your forward line, and have to take a hit really to move that money up front. But Kane's going to be the heavily captain one this game week, sorry. And very, very good point about that, because, as you say, the effective ownership is going to be pretty intense. But yes, I think as long as you can cover those options. Interesting, the player that's caught my eye from Villa that's not on this is Danny Ings. And I think he's coming into a little bit of form. It's a shame it's ahead of Aston Villa's tricky fixtures. But in game week 30 on a free hit, would you be tempted to, put him as a differential against Arsenal?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I love it. I've always rated Danny Ings as a great player. And I think he was a serious option for a little bit around game week 20-ish, 21, when they're, really playing that Christmas tree formation. And I saw it was the game where Watkins didn't play and he was the lone striker around 19 or 20. And I was actually seriously considering him as an option then. So yeah, if listen, on a free hit, you should be having a little bit of fun for sure. Cover the main guys and then go for a little differential, 1 or 2 or 3 here or there. And Danny Ings is perfectly fine.
Yeah, agreed. You need to have that upside to play the free hit. As you say, cover the main guys and, play around with the rest of it. But yeah, I think the message is, just to sum it up, is cover the main guys. If you haven't got the main guys, you're fine. Because I think there's a small pool of players and there's only a limited amount who are actually in form. But the players who are actually in form are definitely worth covering, because they really are hitting it at the moment. Yeah, so good. Okay, well, let's talk about your strategy, Andy. Move on to your game week 30 team. We've got it up on screen here. So blanks for Alexander-Arnold, Robertson and Breuer in your starting 11. But for the benefit of the podcast viewers, listeners, we've got Ramsdale in goal against Aston Villa, Digne with a red flag against Arsenal, Doherty against West Ham, Son against West Ham, Ramsey against Arsenal, Odegaard against Aston Villa, Saka against Aston Villa, and then Kane, your solitary forward with no fixture Breuer next to you. Captain Kane, vice-captain Saka. So yes, you've got 7 players playing. What is your strategy?
Probably.
1, 2, yeah, 6 probably.
Oh, seven. Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, no, sorry, I was right. 7 players. If Digne doesn't play, what is your strategy? Are you going to be bringing in someone to add to this list of players?
Yeah, it's tough. I don't want to speak too much about my team because it's so different from everybody. But I think the mistake I made in game week last week's transfers is I had 3 options that I was trying to pick from. One of them was to just I had, by the way, I didn't have Kane last game week, right? So I could have just taken a -4 and brought in Kulusevski and Doherty, which would have been my triple Spurs for -4. And then option B for me was this move where I brought in Kane by removing Lacazette, downgrading Bowen to Odegaard, and then Doherty from James, I believe, right? And then option C for me was to lose Son and go from Son to Kulusevski, have Lacazette plus Kane and Doherty. And in hindsight, I think option C was the right move. Not because of hindsight points. That's not the point I'm trying to make, right? Son could easily do well this midweek game against West Ham, or I can't remember who, but he could easily do well. So it's not about that. It's the fact that I trapped myself into having no money and very little options to move around with unless I take a -4. So if I had gone the Kulusevski route, then I could have had enough money to maybe upgrade somewhere else into a high EO player that I could defend against. But right now I'm very limited on that. And I don't want to take a hit just to get 9 players in. I'm okay with 8. Because I do have Kane captaincy covered plus Son and the 3 Arsenal. So I might go to a Wolves defender because of wildcard in my back pocket and sort of just defend against that. So I'll have to figure it out. Yeah.
I think the fact that you have Son and Kane is absolutely incredible. I mean, you just got unlucky that Son didn't do anything against Man United. Really good fixture for him on paper. But yeah, they go to Brighton midweek. And I think that's also a decent fixture for them. Like Brighton are a notoriously high possession team. And Spurs do well against them on the counter-attack. So the fact that Brighton probably aren't going to score that many goals against Spurs, but are going to dominate the game in possession, and I think it's going to really suit Son. And I think you're probably going to reap the rewards there.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're not in such a bad position. This is the last game week you have to get through without all of the chip strategy stuff that you've been foregoing. And then the real fun can start from game week 31 when you can, I know you're not wildcarding 31, you're wildcarding 34, but you can start playing all of the chips that you've saved up.
Yeah.
Do you have 2 free hits left?
I only have 1. So the temptation is there, right? Because let's say I free hit this game week. Again, this is why sometimes it's better just to have a worse team than an iffy team like mine, because it's borderline like what do I do, right? But again, as you mentioned, Ted, with Kane and Son, to free hit out of this team is just, I think, not the right play, right? So I'm expecting a red hour in game week 30, which is why I really hope I can make up some ground with my 9 players remaining this game week. But as you mentioned, 31 is my team's perfectly fine for 31. I don't think 32 is necessarily a wild card because Liverpool and City play against each other. So in my situation, a free hit 33 makes sense. Have fun with it. It'll be much more fun than a free hit in 30. And then a wild card in 34 will set me up for a big bench boost in 36, hopefully. And we'll see. We'll see how it pans out. But that's the plan for now. Tentative plan for now.
Really envious of that strategy. Yeah. I mean, from 33 onwards, you're going to be loving life. And you just have to get through this week. I think a lot of people might be in the same position as you, looking at this team. They've got 7 or 8 players and wondering whether to take hits to bring in other players. Let's just lay it out for you guys. if you were going to bring in players, Andy, who would you choose? Would it be someone like Jimenez? Would it be someone like Coutinho or Rafinha and a Wolves defender? And do you think those guys are worth hits to bring in just for game week 30?
This is for wildcarders or
For
people with no one?
For people who are in a similar position to you, wondering
Okay.
whether they should take hits to bring in players just for game week 30.
Yeah. So this is another like meta talk, but I was thinking about this a lot, right? I was thinking like, for example, if I brought in a Rafinha this game week as a -4, is it actually a -4? Regardless of whether he returns or not, because you're taking a -4 to defend against it, right? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. We have the same conversation every year on this. The fact that you're bringing in another player because the player you'd be bringing him in for doesn't have a fixture, those 2 appearance points that you get for that player basically just make that -4, -2. We have the same conversation in FPL community every single year, and it kind of does work to a certain extent. But if you think about it in the long term, that's the thing. Do you want that player for the next 4 or 5 game weeks? And that's when it works out.
I don't think it matters for us, right? Because we're going to wild card out of it. I mean, there's no outstanding option that I want in 31 or 32 that I already don't have, at least in my situation right now. So
if you if you're wildcarding in the next few weeks, then I completely agree. You don't really need to think about it. You only need to think about it in that short term up to your wildcard. But for people like me who need to consider like what my team is going to look like for the rest of the season,
that's different.
Definitely need to consider like whether this player provides long term value or not.
Yeah, you have to like. One thing I learned recently is that you have to be, Ted, moving towards like maximizing your starting 11. And that also means you have to be looking at transfers now that affect transfers in 34 beyond, especially like for you, 31 to 33 is something you need to forget about at this point, I think, because the next big upswing starts in game week 33, it's 33 and beyond. And so that's when you don't want to be losing ground to people like me who will be, going wild with the chips. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The only chip I'll have left is a solitary free hit. And I think I'll probably end up using it in 36, but it means I have to get through 33. That's going to be the danger week for me. I need to be, fairly confident that I'm going to get a decent starting 11 out. And we just won't know until after game week 30. But at least 2 or 3 transfers to sort it out might not be the end of the world. But apparently, Spurs and Arsenal have a very good chance of having a double game week against each other with that second fixture. So hopefully the dovetailing of loading up on Arsenal and Spurs, as we kind of all have in this double game week 29, then they have a fixture in 30 strategy, might come to fruition in game week 33. But it might not be optimal to a certain extent. So yeah,
that's a great we're going on tangent here, but that's another great point you made, because while I might be feeling like, okay, my upswing is going to come later, it really depends on how these doubles fall. Because let's say all the popular players that we already have great doubles, then my strategy becomes less effective versus someone like you who really maximized 26 to 30 and you're getting less damage now, whereas right now I'm getting a lot more damage. Granted, I survived because of James' captaincy, but yeah.
It's situational luck again. All of our FPL decisions sometimes ride on the decision of some guy in an office just going, yeah, I'm going to plonk that fixture there and there. That's the long and short of it. And we can just be on the wrong side of that sometimes. Definitely been on the wrong side myself a few times, but it just is what it is. You've got to do with the best that you can. And that's all you can do. But yes, we've got like 750 concurrent viewers. Thank you everyone for joining us. I'm going to look at my team in a minute, but before we do, smash that like button. It's going to help that YouTube algorithm by showing the video to more people. That would really help. So yeah, if you've enjoyed it, please do like it. But yes, on to my team. And I am very fortunate to say that I have 11 players out. with Digne on the bench, sadly. But yes, the transfers I made last week, bringing in Doherty, Kulusevski and Kane, helped me field 12 for game week 30. Unfortunately, Digne has now got injured, so that kind of reduces it down to 11. But fairly happy with this team. I'm happy that I've got the likes of Lacazette and Jimenez up front with Kane. Saka, Coutinho, Rafinha and Kulusevski in the midfield is pretty decent. Double Wolves defence kind of does worry me to a certain extent because I kind of think that Leeds are going to score. But I kind of think that, people are going to have Sarr in goal. People are going to have Saiss. People are going to have Kilman, the cheaper players like Kilman. So I think double Wolves defence might be quite popular. So probably isn't the end of the world if they do concede, but at least we've got a playing player, right? And Ramsdale, he keeps saving against like these high profile teams like Leicester, and he's kept 2 clean sheets against them this season. So is Aston Villa any different? Not 100% sure. Now the big downside about game week 30, and what we've kind of been alluded to all video, is that all of these teams play each other. In a normal FPL game week, you kind of want to avoid having players in your team that play each other because it reduces that ceiling. Well, this is the game week. This is why that ceiling is going to be very low. This is why it's not going to be a 100-point game week. It's going to be 40 points maximum. Because if one team does well, the other team's not.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I look, first of all, that team looks ridiculous. Wow. I'm very jealous. Because there's no way you get a red arrow from this team. Just the fact that you have the key piece. I mean, maybe Son is a huge threat to you. For sure, he'll be a threat to you. But I think that's about it from what I see. And his points can be covered easily by Kulusevski, for example. So
I don't know. I mean, I think maybe. I think West Ham's a good fixture for Son, but yeah, you're right. That's the only player I'm sort of fearing at the moment. There's going to be 1 or 2 for most of us, whoever you're going without. You just got to hope that they don't do well. But, FPL, it is what it is. And this team is just a result of the chip strategy that I followed, Andy. So
yeah, very well. Nicely done.
You're going to be reaping the rewards from game week 31. But yeah, this is the last week that I can say comfortably, I planned for this.
Yeah.
Next week onwards is going to be very difficult. But yeah, pretty happy with this. Let's see if it brings more green arrows. I can't believe in the top 10k. I really need to consolidate that because that was the aim all season. Let's see what we can do.
So in this team, you ideally want Wolves to keep a clean sheet and Rafinha to just pretty much blank, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I think Jimenez is going to score against Leeds. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't. I think Leeds are so leaky, especially in the big chances element. Like Wolves typically have tentative shots from outside the box, like Podence, Ruben Neves, Hwang. They always kind of shoot from distance. Jimenez always gets into good positions, but he never gets that service. Yeah. So it's going to be a really interesting matchup. I really can't call what's going to happen. It might just end up being 0-0. I'd be quite happy with that, to be honest.
Richard Lewis asked a great question. Who would you change if you're using a free hit, if any? So your team is very optimal for game week 30 and very strong defensive as well. Maybe you go for a Leicester player here and there. But yeah, I don't think I would remove anyone from that midfield, right?
It's difficult. Like Coutinho against Arsenal, like he's an excellent player, but Arsenal are playing out of this world at the moment. So having someone like
I could see that,
like Maddison, whose maybe minutes aren't completely secure. If you want to go for secure minutes, Harvey Barnes is definitely an alternative. I mean, Brentford, you never know what you're going to get with Brentford. Like, don't be confused. They have played Norwich and Burnley in the last 2 games, Brentford. So their results against some of the 2 worst teams in the league. Sorry, Burnley. Not sure you completely deserve that because you're actually a decent team. But I think Brentford are probably playing a little bit better than they ought to just because they've been favouring from optimal fixtures. So I think Leicester will turn Brentford over. And I think, Barnes or Maddison, if they do start, will be a big part of that. So I think that's probably what I would change. Defensively, it's very difficult, Andy. Like, who's going to keep clean sheets this week? Maybe Arsenal. Not sure Spurs keep a clean sheet against West Ham. Not sure Wolves keep a clean sheet against Leeds. Definitely.
It's really, really difficult. Like, it could go horribly wrong. For example, if you go for like a Leicester defender, because I don't trust their defense one bit, right? I guess the Coutinho move makes sense, but again, high risk there. Um, maybe I remove Jimenez for Tony, believe it or not. Look, I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but maybe that's the risk I would take, just because besides the 2 easy fixtures they had, the guy's scoring right now. So you might want to take a chance. Granted, he did score 2 in the very last, dying minutes of the game. So, maybe I'll go there. But again, you're very bullish on Jimenez, and there's plenty of reason to see why. So
I don't know.
This is a very optimal team. Very, very interesting how you got here. Yeah.
I'm happy with it. But just going back to your Jimenez point, it might be blind loyalty because he was such an amazing player a couple of seasons ago, or 2 or 3 seasons ago. He definitely doesn't have that goal threat that he used to do. Wolves definitely under Lage have sort of decreased their attacking potential, and Jimenez isn't definitely as certainly not prolific as he once was. But against Leeds that are conceding so many big chances, he's the player you want in this team from Wolves. 100%.
Yeah, then that means that front line for you is optimal. It's could be the ideal for you at front line too. Yeah. Leicester forward, maybe you go there. Daka, Iheanacho, I don't know.
Daka, Iheanacho, like both minimal stats at the moment. But as we've said, if you're going to free hit, you cover the main options, you go for the weird ones like Danny Ings, Iheanacho, Daka, the players that nobody's considering, the differentials, because they could pay off in 1 week. Sometimes stats are misleading when you're looking at 1 week.
For sure. For a 1 week free hit, stats should be taken very lightly. Not very lightly, but somewhat lightly, because in 1 week, anything can happen. We base our stats off of long term, right? So
yeah, exactly. Okay. Well, I mean, I'm happy about those comments. I'm, fielding 11 players this week is just a challenge in itself, but for it to also look fairly decent, happy with that. But, as I said, this is the last week that I'm going to be assured of my planning ends. So, yeah, hand over the reins to you and you can lead the the planning conversations.
This guy, Ted, trying to be nice, but he's smirking and below that happy face. Like, oh, I got you, Andy.
Don't be like that.
I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Goodness. Yeah. I mean, it's not even like, how many game weeks have we got left? We haven't got
not that
30
many.
to 38. Yeah. That's 9 plus extra fixtures in 29. There's a long way to go. We're only just over 2/3 of the way through the season. I find that really difficult to think about. So, like tons of rank to be obtained.
It's so funny. The first thing I said is not that many. That's just like the psychology behind FPL. You're obviously doing well, and you see there's a lot left, and you have played your chips, whereas I haven't played my chips, and I feel like it's crunch time, and there's not many weeks to gain, and very, very interesting.
We'll turn that frown upside down, bud. Don't worry.
Oh no! I by the way, guys, I like it. I'm just having fun on Twitter about like, I'm the worst FPL. I tweeted that out, I think yesterday, like the worst FPL player alive or something like that. But obviously I don't mean it. It's just, it's fun to laugh at yourself sometimes when things don't work out. But, FPL is still a game for me, and I just enjoy it, right? I actually enjoy these bad weeks as well. So yeah.
Absolutely. Half the fun is just like thinking of how you're going to solve the problems you have. It's another problem to solve. But, as FPL managers, we always want more, don't we? Like, I was having a fairly decent game week, and I was just like cursing last night that I left Cody on the bench. But it's everything in relative. Exactly. Like, I feel like a complete, you just feel silly for wanting more. Like, even if you're having a good game week, but it's just human nature, right?
That's fine. That's fine. We're all greedy. We want more points.
Anyway, yeah. I think we'll leave it there, chaps. Thank you very much for joining me. If you haven't pressed that like button, do. It does help the YouTube algorithm. But thanks, Andy, for joining me as well. Absolute legend, and best of luck for the rest of Game Week 29 and, of course, Game Week 30. You'll be back on Wednesday with Burning Questions with Praz?
I hope not, because this guy's gonna just tear me apart on Wednesday. Cross is killing it. Yeah. So happy for him. At the same time, oh God,
Oh
he's going to be
no,
smirking at me. Yeah.
you'll be fine. You don't run through your teams on Wednesday, do you?
Sorry.
You don't run through your teams on burning questions. So
At the end, we do. We do.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Well, that's my commiserations to you, buddy, because he's smashing it at the moment. But yeah, as I said, your time will come. I'm not going to repeat myself. Your time will come. It's all good. And we'll be suffering. But yeah, thanks everyone again. Absolute pleasure as always. Have an excellent rest of your Monday, I should say. And yeah, best of luck for the rest of all of the FPLness in 29 and 30. But yeah, it's bye from me.
Yeah, bye from me. Thank you guys.
See ya.